My name's Peter from Wiltshire Libraries, and I'm presenting this edition of Tea and Chat, where myself and colleagues from Wiltshire Libraries share readings of poems and writing with you. I've got my tea here, some Earl Grey today as a bit of a change. I hope you've got a favourite beverage to hand. This Tea and Chat is going out live in Libraries Week 2021, which celebrates UK libraries in the first week of October. And also on this Thursday, the 7th, it's also National Poetry Day. So the theme of this session is both the nation's favourite poems and libraries. If you watched Basil from Trowbridge Libraries' Tea and Chat in August, you may be familiar with the BBC book The Nation's Favourite Poems. Here it is, if I hold it up. There it is. This book was produced back in 1995 for National Poetry Day. It was produced in conjunction with a programme that Griff Rhys-Jones presented called The Bookworm on BBC Television, and the nation were asked to pick their 100 favourite poems, which are all in this book. So I thought it would be quite appropriate in this Tea and Chat to read some more poems from the nation's favourite poems. But I'm going to try and pick some different ones, the ones that Basil and some of my colleagues have read in the past. So I'm going to go for some ones that haven't been read recently. So the first poem I've chosen is number 43 in the nation's favourite poems, and it is called High Flight, an Airman's Ecstasy. And that is by John Gillespie Magee. So High Flight, an Airman's Ecstasy. Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter's silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds, and done 100 things you have not dreamed of. Wheeled and soared and swung, high in the sunlit silence. Hovering there, I've chased the shouting wind along, and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air. Up, up, the long, delirious, burning blue, I've topped the windswept heights with easy grace, where never lark nor even eagle flew, and while with silent lifting mind I've trod the high untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God. That was High Flight, an Airman's Ecstasy by John Gillespie Magee, and that was number 43 in the nation's favourite poems. I love the imagery of flying in that poem. I don't know if it's just because the nights are drawing in or it's something to do with everything else that's happening in the world at the moment, but the description of soaring away through sunlit skies certainly seems appealing to me at the moment. There are some individual poems that are so popular they seem to appear in every list of favourite poems. Wordsworth's The Daffodils is one, and If by Rudyard Kipling is another. And it was Kipling's If that was number one in the nation's favourite poems. But I'm not going to read either of those today, as they've been read in previous episodes this year. Instead, I'm going to read a poem by W.B. Yeats. In the intro to the nation's favourite poems, Griff Rhys-Jones says that if the poll had been for the nation's favourite poet, as opposed to poem, then Yeats would have certainly come on top, as he had more poems nominated than anyone else. But because he had so many poems nominated, it split the vote. So he didn't come top. That was Rudyard Kipling's If. The one I've chosen to read to you is When You Are Old. So this is When You Are Old by W.B. Yeats. When you are old and grey and full of sleep, and nodding by the fire, take down this book and slowly read, and dream of the soft look your eyes had once, and of their shadows deep. How many loved your moments of glad grace, and loved your beauty with love false or true? But one man loved the pilgrim soul in you, and loved the sorrows of your changing face. And, bending down beside the glowing bars, murmur a little sadly how love fled, and paced upon the mountains overhead, and hid his face amid a crowd of stars. So that was When You Were Old by W.B. Yeats, which was 37 in the nation's favourite poems, but also mentions reading a book, which I'm using as a very tenuous link to our second theme of libraries for this session. Incidentally, one of my favourite quotes about books, which is attributed to Groucho Marx, is "Outside of a dog, a book is a man's best friend. Inside of a dog, it's too dark to read." I've seen that quote on display in more than one library, including Wiltshire. Answers in the comments if you can tell me which library in Wiltshire has got that quote up. Now I'd like to recommend another book of favourite poems that's also available through Wiltshire libraries, and that's this one. Dancing by the Light of the Moon by Giles Brandreth. Its subtitle is How Poetry Can Transform Your Memory and Change Your Life. Over 250 of our favourite poems to love and learn. It's available through Wiltshire libraries, as are all of the books that I'll be holding up and recommending and reading poems from in this session. It has to be said that obviously it is written by Giles Brandreth. So if you find Giles Brandreth annoying and don't like his style, you may not like this book. However, I really enjoyed reading it, and he does make some serious arguments about learning poems off by heart. His argument is that by learning poems off by heart, you can not only help your memory, but give you a deeper appreciation of poems and poetry. On the back of the book, it says, "Poetry is officially good for you. Not only does it enhance literacy in the young, but learning poetry by heart is the one true pleasurable thing you can do to improve memory, boosts brain power and beat cognitive decline as time goes by." In Dancing by the Light of the Moon, there are over 250 poems to read, relish and recite. To learn them by heart and you will, it says here, never be lost for words again, extend your intellect and vocabulary, cut your chances of suffering dementia, be better acquainted with the greats from Shakespeare to Spike Milligan, and discover new poems from Simon Armitage to Rupi Kaur. So there you go. If you're like me and you now struggle to memorise more than a limerick, I should say that it is also a very good read. So you don't have to be able to memorise poems. One of the few poems that I used to be able to recite from memory is the Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll, which is also one of the nation's favourite poems and appears in the nation's favourite poetry book. I'm going to try and read it here, but while I'm staring down the barrel of a webcam, I cannot think that I am going to be able to do it off by heart these days, so apologies. You'll just have to check my eyes, but I think I'll probably be able to get through the first stanza and then I'm going to have to recourse to reading from the book. "'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe, all mimsy were the borogoves and the moonraths outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jubjub bird, and shun the frumious bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand, long time the manxome foe he sought. So rested he by the tumtum tree, and stood awhile in thought. And as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock with eyes of flame came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. And thou hast slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. Oh, frabjous day, calloo callay, he chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the moonraths outgrabe. So, that was the Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll. Now that one has been read in sessions before, but I couldn't resist doing it here because I just love the bizarre language in it and the way it sounds. And as I say, once upon a time, I could recite that by heart. I'm going to have to take inspiration from Giles Brandreth's book and see if I can learn that again. Of course, if Giles Brandreth or any book that you take out of a library does annoy you, the beauty of libraries is you can take it back. So I would recommend giving that one a go. He does have a very interesting little bit about reading Shakespeare. and it's difficult not to do a bit of Shakespeare during a session on the nation's favourite poetry. So I'm going to do one of the Bard's sonnets here. I'm going to do sonnet 116, and that's the one that starts, "Let me not to the marriage of true minds." Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved. So that's sonnet 116 by William Shakespeare, that starts, "Let me not to the marriage of true minds," and argues that true love is not affected by the passing of time. That was number 84 in the nation's favourite poems, by the way. So, this week is also Libraries Week, and you'll find all sorts of information about things you can find in Wiltshire libraries on our website. That's wiltshire.gov.uk/libraries, which is also written on the side of your library card, and on our Wiltshire Libraries Twitter feed, and our various Wiltshire Library Facebook pages, including this one that this broadcast is going out from, which is at Wiltshire Mobile Libraries. And you'll see that each day this week our communications team have put out a film about libraries and all the things that you can find in Wiltshire libraries, which we hope you'll enjoy. I've always loved libraries, and some of my earliest memories are of being taken by my mum to the public library in the town near where I grew up, and being amazed that I could borrow any books that I wanted for free. One of my favourite childhood books, which I still reread, is Treasure Island. I've got a copy of it here, a library copy in fact. There we go, that's the Scholastic edition of Treasure Island, available from all good libraries, including Wiltshire. I've decided, by the way, to read this in a very spooky room. You'll see that I've deliberately put in some atmospheric lighting just to add to the atmosphere for today's session. So, Treasure Island, what a fantastic book. I absolutely urge you, if you haven't read it recently, to read it again. Use the excuse of reading it to a child or a grandchild if you have to, but don't go too young. Remember, this was written by the person who wrote Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and at its heart, John Silver, the character, is a one-legged Bristolian anti-hero who also happens to be a psychopath. It's not Pirates of the Caribbean, but what a brilliant book. And actually at the beginning of some editions, including this one, is a poem that Robert Louis Stevenson included in the book called "To the Hesitating Purchaser." So I thought it would be appropriate, as it is the week of National Poetry Day, to read the poem from Treasure Island. So this is "To the Hesitating Purchaser" by Robert Louis Stevenson, and recommends all sorts of his, at the time, contemporary children's writers. If sailor tales to sailor tunes, storm and adventure, heat and cold, if schooners, islands and maroons, and buccaneers and buried gold, and all the old romance retold, exactly in the ancient way, can please as me they pleased of old, the wiser youngsters of today. So be it, and fall on. If not, if studious youth no longer crave, his ancient appetites forgot, Kingston or Ballantyne the brave, or Cooper of the wood and wave, so be it also, and may I and all my pirates share the grave where these and their creations lie. So that was The Hesitating Purchaser in the front of Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. I don't think there's any danger of Treasure Island being put to one side anytime soon. Still an absolute classic. and one that I thoroughly recommend, and I end up rereading it usually at least once every couple of years or so. So I've got some other poems that I thought we should read before we end today. And one of the ones that I thought I would do is something that has a link to autumn. And at the end of the last Tea and Chat session with Steph, which was themed on autumn and harvest, if you've watched it, you will remember that the last poem that Steph did was Keats' Ode to Autumn, Season of Mists and Mellow Fruitfulness, which was number 6 in the nation's favourite poems. So I thought I would go for a spooky alternative poem to autumn, taken from another book that I would like to recommend you, which is this one. This is, let's see, there we go, A Nature Poem for Every Night of the Year. And it's edited by Jane McMorland Hunter. And you can look up any day of the year, and it will recommend you a poem appropriate for that day's night, to paraphrase the Beatles. So they tend to be atmospheric and have a sort of like nighttime type atmosphere to them. And so this particular one, which is called Grongar Hill, and this is an extract from Grongar Hill by John Dyer, who was a contemporary of Shakespeare, and it's lines 57 to 83. And I thought this would be a good one as a sort of, particularly as we are now moving into the weather's turned, the nights are drawing in, and we're moving towards the time in autumn at the end of October where we have Halloween. So I love the atmosphere in this one and the description of trees and mouldering ruins. So here is Grongar Hill by John Dyer. Below me trees unnumbered rise, beautiful in various dyes, the gloomy pine, the poplar blue, the yellow beech, the sable yew, the slender fir that taper grows, the sturdy oak with widespread boughs. And beyond the purple grove, haunt of Phyllis, queen of love, gaudy as the opening dawn, lies a long and level lawn, on which a dark hill, steep and high, holds and charms the wandering eye. Deep are his feet in Towey's flood, his sides are clothed with waving wood, and ancient towers crown his brow, that cast an awful look below, whose ragged walls the ivy creeps, and with her arms from falling keeps, so both a safety from the wind in mutual dependence find. 'Tis now the raven's bleak abode, 'tis now the apartment of the toad, and there the fox securely feeds, and there the poisonous adder breeds, concealed in ruins, moss and weeds, while ever and anon there falls huge heap of hoary mouldered walls. So there we go. That was Grongar Hill by John Dyer. And I also really like in this poem the mention of Phyllis, queen of love. I was not aware that there was a goddess of love called Phyllis, but if you know any Phyllises in your life, tell them to read Grongar Hill, where Phyllis, the queen of love, is praised. So there we go. So I hope that you've enjoyed the poems that I've read so far from the nation's favourite poems. I have mentioned that I wasn't going to do The Daffodils by William Wordsworth, but there was another one of his which I did want to read, which appeared in this book, and it is one that on Westminster Bridge. Now I think that this one has been read recently in one of the other, or at least a little while ago. And so my apologies if you've listened to the last episode where this one was. He says, frantically looking through to find it. But it was one that I wanted to do again because it's one of his less known ones. It's not that I've got anything against the Daffodils. It's a great poem, and I do frequently read it, particularly if it is a spring session. But I thought this one was more appropriate for this time of year. So this is Upon Westminster Bridge by William Wordsworth. Earth has not anything to show more fair. Dull would he be of soul who could pass by a sight so touching in its majesty. This city now doth like a garment wear the beauty of the morning, silent, bare. Ships, towers, domes, theatres and temples lie, open unto the fields and to the sky, all bright and glittering in the smokeless air. Never did sun more beautifully steep in his first splendour valley, rock or hill. Ne'er saw I, never felt a calm so deep. The river glideth at his own sweet will. Dear God, the very houses seem asleep, and all that mighty heart is lying still. So, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Tea and Chat that was themed to coincide with National Poetry Day and Libraries Week. The next Tea and Chat from Wiltshire Libraries will be at 3 p.m. on Tuesday the 19th of October with Philip on the @Salisbury Library Facebook page, and we hope that you can join us then. Thank you for listening, happy reading, and once I can find the log out, it's going to be goodbye from me. Goodbye for now.